I am Bill Huffman, and welcome to this week's bonus episode of Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic. On this week's episode, I'll be hosting a roundtable discussion with James Renner and Nic from True Crime Garage about the recent documentary series that aired on the Investigation Discovery Channel these past few weekends called The Lake Erie Murders, Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic. The documentary was just released and so far has garnered some new information for authorities. Information they are obviously keeping close to the vest. The director Tom, his director of photography, and 4 other light and sound guys interviewed me in September at my home and studio. It was quite the production, and it was comforting to see how much effort and care they were actually putting into this story. With a case like Amy's, where the people involved want to see resolution, it was pretty impressive to see the amount of work that they were actually putting in. I believe they said they had started this project over a year ago and were very excited about it coming to a close. As the doorbell rang and when I opened the door, there were 2 black minivans pulling up. And there stood Tom, about 6'2", skinny and British. He introduced himself and was very courteous the whole 6 hours that they occupied our house. And actually that should be said for the whole crew. They were obviously tired, but were very keen on making sure that every shot looked and sounded just right. The crew emptied out their vans and quickly filled the kitchen and dining room with their equipment. There were an army of guys working together to finish these last few shots. And I believe I was one of the last people to be interviewed before they actually hit the editing bay. Tom spent the first few hours after he arrived devouring the collection of news clippings that had grown over the years. The original newspaper clips that were used in the series came straight out of the archive that was given to me by a source. Reading and seeing the original newspapers adds to the reality of this tragedy, and I thought Tom did a great job of using the clippings effectively. The 3 of us, Nic, James, and myself, were lucky enough to be part of this series, and on this week's episode, we get together to discuss, our experiences and basically what we thought about the program. So let's jump right in the middle of our conversation with Nic, James, and myself.
Go ahead and start.
Are you doing just audio or are you doing video too?
No, I'm just doing audio. I'm not recording video. I'm just figured since we're all here, we might as well look at each other.
Yeah. So I can leave the curlers in my hair.
Oh, absolutely. Leave the curlers in the hair. Drink your bottle of Jack if you got it. Or
stay in your boxer shorts.
Yep, exactly. Whatever you got going on, it's all good.
So because I watched the documentary, I feel like I just saw you guys last week.
It does. Yeah. It does feel that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. But that was like, when were they here? When did you do your interview for them?
So
was that like back in April or May?
Didn't you remember when you and I met for an early lunch in?
Yes.
Near, I don't remember where you picked a great spot. It was
the Moosehead Saloon.
Yeah, fairly close to Bay Village. Like, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so from Bay?
Oh, like even closer. It's like
even
5
closer.
Minutes. It's around the corner, yeah.
Literally right across the tracks from Bay Village.
So when we went to the saloon there for lunch, after you and I drove around Bay Village, I drove over to Lakewood and did the interviews that day.
Oh, wow.
So that was, May?
That sounds
Probably
right.
May. Yeah. And Bill did
Where was it that you and... Yeah, I did mine in September. Yeah, it was real late.
Bill, you drove to Delaware County and met me here, and we spoke. We spoke, that must have been July, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was right in the middle of the summer, right after... Yeah, because I had just gotten back from Michigan, so I think it was in maybe July 28th, around that area, end of July. But yeah, I know when they were coming back to do extra filming, that's when they contacted me to, set up the interviews. And they did it all at my house. Where did you do your interview?
So they rented a home that they were staying in while they were filming in the area. They did a Airbnb thing. And so they rented this house, and they just filmed me at the house.
Oh,
Which
that's
I remember,
cool.
Yeah, I remember telling James, I was like, "Yeah, I've never met any of these people," and he's like, "Where are they filming you later today?" I was like, "Well, I googled it. It's a house." And James goes, "Yeah, that's weird." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man. Thanks. Now I feel
It could have
great."
been a murder house.
Yeah,
Like,
it's an ambush.
that would be the last time anybody ever saw Nick.
Well, wasn't it? Oh gosh, wasn't it Trent Reznor who rented the Sharon Tate house to record one of his albums?
Yes, I just read about that. Yeah.
That's
Wow.
pretty wild.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
bunch of musicians, I guess, have rented that place. It was originally owned by a record producer who did the albums for the Byrds. Like Tambourine Man and that stuff.
It makes me just think of like reruns from the 80s when I was a kid. You know,
Well, there
Nick at
was
Night.
some thought that the house was targeted not because it was Tate's house or who's that Roman Polanski or whatever.
Polanski, yeah.
Yeah, there's some
was,
thought that it was targeted because of the record executive or the whoever you just mentioned.
right, because Manson was a failed musician, or
Terry Melcher, I think his name
He was a failed everything.
well, I mean, he somehow succeeded in convincing these crazy chicks to go and murder some people. So that,
Right.
I don't know if that's some
Other
sort of
other
success.
than getting people to drop acid and have sex with him, he failed at everything.
Yeah,
There-
and apparently he was very short.
Aw.
But then there's another argument too that that his group, his little cult there, came up with the first set of murders, that idea by themselves, and then he actually ordered the second set of murders to reestablish control over them, like to make it look like he had,
Oh, weird.
he led them to that all along.
Right. No. I was thinking the same thing. Let's do this.
Right.
Is that what he was thinking?
Right.
Charles Manson, what a
Well,
character.
he never actually killed anybody, though.
No,
Like personally,
Right.
which I think is interesting. Like everybody viewed him as this evil, and he was. But he personally never killed anybody. He just ordered people to, which I guess is splitting
I
hairs.
interviewed Diane Lake, and her book is fairly decent, but the interview was terrible. Like, I mean,
No,
that
Diane
was-
Lake was she one of the Manson
She
family?
was-
Who's
she was one of the Manson family, but she didn't go along on any of the murders. She wasn't present during any of them. Like, she spoke to Manson family members after the murders, and
Oh.
she was kind of told about it. She was arrested during the raid when they came and raided that wherever they were staying. And
Yeah.
I asked her like just pretty basic questions about what she thought about Tex and what she thought about, Squiggy. I don't even know the names of these people anymore, but
yeah.
her answers were like, I never put any thought into that. I'm thinking, this is like how many, 50 years ago or whatever, 30, 40 years. You've had plenty of time to think about this. You've not put any thought into you being very good friends with these people that murdered a bunch of people.
Yeah, I guess that's just how you deal with it. Just compartmentalizing and not going into that part of your brain or whatever. I guess that's one way of dealing with it.
well, in a sense, James, it's kind of what you do. I mean, you deal with the.
What?
I'm just saying, not that you're a serial killer, that you're that you deal with serial killers or deal with death on a daily basis with your
Jeez.
job. So you do have to compartmentalize all that
Sure.
stuff,
Yeah.
and be a normal person, because if you let all that stuff get you down, like we all know,
Sure.
bad
That's-
shit can happen.
That's why they say there's all that similarity between detectives and the people they hunt, the bad guys,
Mhm.
because they both have that same capability of compartmentalizing and in living with that dark stuff, which is interesting, I guess. But I was wondering, like, not to lead the interview or anything, but after watching the documentary, were there, now for me, there were a couple things in there that after writing a book on it, after talking about this case for 12, 13 years now, that I didn't know. Were there things in there that you guys didn't know?
I guess I would want to know. Go ahead, Nick. No, go ahead.
There definitely were things in there that I did not know. I kind of forgot about the fake phone call. You know, the person that called and claimed to be Amy.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about that. I don't remember hearing about that.
I had heard that somewhere years ago, but dismissed it because it was, so obviously fake, and they knew, very quickly that it was a fake call. So, but that was interesting to just be reminded of that. I had kind of completely forgot about that. But there were a couple things that I was not aware of, which was interesting for someone who's, followed the case for so long to hear some new information, new to me anyway. And that to me is really what points immediately to them doing a great job, I think, on the documentary. They were very thorough.
Yeah, I thought it turned out extremely well. And I mean, it's really hard to do those things well, and with reenactments and
without making it cheesy.
And I thought they did. And I don't know if I'm just biased because we were all in it, but it was one of those things that I thought it told the story very well, and I mean really thoroughly. I mean, 3 hours dedicated to the whole case is really kind of crazy. I mean, for a cable network, just one case.
I was surprised too about the detours they took into, the almost the paranormal or the weird parts of this case. That and there's so many weird parts of this case, but they got into the Ouija board stuff that happened with her friend. They got into this truth serum that they gave to one of the suspects, which I couldn't believe the police verified for them. I knew it was true because I talked to the suspect, but the police were always kind of quiet about that aspect. And this is the only case I've ever heard of where, at least in modern days, where they gave a suspect truth serum. And then, some of the, the psychic, weirdness stuff that goes on with that too. But yeah, I was interested. It was interesting to see that they kept that stuff in.
Yeah. The verification on the truth serum. I mean, you and I have, James, and we've discussed that before. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast or not, but I do remember talking about that. And let's just back up real quick, just for people that don't know what truth serum actually is. Mm-hmm. I mean, back in the 60s when they were testing all this stuff, weren't they using acid or LSD, or was it?
They tested, that's kind of one of the forms that they used back in the day, but with this particular suspect, this Harold Bound, that was connected to Holly Hill Farms, they used sodium pentothal on him. And it's like, they have a very specific amount that they use because sodium pentothal at the time actually was also used as lethal injection.
I was just going to say, it sounds so familiar. It sounds like one of those lethal injection drugs.
It's one of the parts, right?
Right. One of the three drugs.
The three.
I guess they give, and the reason they were able to use it is because Bound, he had served in Vietnam in military intelligence, so he knew and had experience with interrogations and truth serum. And he told them, he's like, look, you can't, I could beat a lie detector test. You could give me a lie detector test, but it's not going to mean anything. Mm-hmm. Nobody can beat truth serum. So give me truth serum. So it was the suspect's request, not the police, which I don't think was made entirely clear, but that's how they were able to use that in this case and why it's not usually used.
Yeah, that's, that was definitely one of the things that stood out. And from talking to people that, watched the documentary, that was one of the things that really stood out to them as far as holy shit, I can't believe they actually used that in 1989.
Right.
It just seemed sort of archaic, but
Soviet Union.
Yeah,
you will tell us your secrets.
Yeah, we're gonna come and get you, and we'll dope you up and tell us everything you know.
Well, and I've only heard of it being used in a handful of cases, but like you said, what's interesting is how recent that is. I mean, this would have been
Yes,
1990 or past, when I don't know when they gave him the truth serum, but the probably the most recent case other than Amy's that I can think of that it's acknowledged that truth serum was used was in the Colonial Parkway murders. There was one suspect.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a suspect in one set of the 4 killings. He wasn't a suspect in all 4. And it was this younger guy, and he had a pretty big drug problem. And I don't know if he requested it or what, because, you know, you do have some situations where you have a suspect in front of you and they're saying, hey, I'll do whatever it takes I'm not your guy, you know, hook me up to a lie detector, call this person, check this, check that. I'll, you know, search my home, my car. I'll do anything because I'm innocent. And so I don't know what the situation was there, but they did give him the truth serum. The weird thing about in that case, if I remember correctly, he never said that he stuck to his portion that he was not involved in the killing of this young man and young woman, but it seems like he manipulated the crime scene somehow, like maybe he stole some things from their vehicle after they were gone. So he had some kind of weird involvement that did come out, but only after given the truth serum.
Sure. I hope he got immunity for for the petty crimes.
Yeah, he remains suspect on some people's list because he was really into drugs and alcohol. He didn't live much longer after, and I can't remember if it was the drugs and alcohol that took him or if it was something else. But he's no longer around, that particular suspect. But one thing before we get into it too much, we did talk about how well they did and how easily these things can turn out bad. The documentaries are, you know, they can get cheesy, full of Velveeta. I've certainly seen my share of bad ones along the way, but
majority of them are.
Yeah. My only criticism that I can think of sitting here today, I thought the person that they got to play Spetzel was interesting. Am I remembering correctly? Like he would do like that, like anytime somebody would say something suspicious, they would pan to him like up close, and he's like making this like very like.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
twisting his mustache.
It's like they casted a guy that would have been better cast to play some kind of pervert or some kind of suspect rather than the guy that would go on to be the chief of police.
Well, he went in for the suspect, and they decided that they already had one for that. So they said, well, why don't you just play this other role? Because, that other one's filled.
If I were Spetzel, I would be like, really? This is, when you spoke to me, this is who you came up with to play me.
In the contract, I thought I said I had casting approval.
Right. What, George
Send
Clooney
me the
was
headshots.
busy? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad they got Brad Pitt for my reenactment on Key West. That was on point casting.
I have to mention that you had quite a witty response to people's reaction to your from when the book came out to your interview now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was my favorite cut in the whole 3-hour documentary is when they showed the footage of my first interview on TV talking about Amy Mihaljevic, and then they cut to me now, and it's like you see this like young man, this youthful young man, and then you cut, and it's like I picked the wrong chalice in The Last Crusade, and like you could see that immediate aging and the receding of my hairline. That was wonderful. That was a wake-up call. No, but it was good. I don't know about you guys, when it aired, and it's aired a couple times now. I was surprised. I can tell a lot of people are watching it because I got a ton of emails like the next day, and some of these were legitimate tips, and I forwarded a number of these tips to police and FBI. Now, a lot of them revolved around the suspect from Key West, but a couple of them were suspects I had not heard of. But yeah, what was the response like for you guys?
I've received various things on Facebook. Lots of weird things happen to me like this. I've received phone calls. Yeah, I actually had like just even recently, like this morning, somebody from the Netherlands had just watched the documentary and had said that they had some information, and I'm not sure what to take it with a grain of salt, what they see, I don't know what their connection is, but there are a lot of different people that have reached out and said, well, one, the documentary was great to keep the case open, but like you said, a lot of it was about, the guy from Key West and basically saying, oh, it's gotta be him. And, you just, that's sort of the response that I've received, but I definitely got a lot of I received weird phone calls.
What, like hang-ups? Like
Not like hang-ups, but just
is
like
your refrigerator running?
no, not like that type of not like prank calls like we would make as kids, but like creepy calls. And a girl from back in the past, she had reached out and said that she had received some calls when she was in the 4th grade and that her dad had intercepted them, and didn't make much of it at the time, but she was younger than Amy would have been. So
where was she going to school at the time?
Rocky River.
Oh, okay.
So it was just.
Did you know her personally, like as kids?
Yeah,
I
didn't know her at that time, but I knew her later in life, and then she reached out when the documentary aired.
Right, now that you're super famous, she's like, "Hey, I gotta check out what this guy's doing."
Yeah, right. But no, the response has been great. I mean, how about you, Nick? I mean, I know this is a passion case for you, and
well, we certainly received a lot of feedback, a lot of good feedback, but not so much in the form of any tips or people coming forward with any type of information, just more so hey, this has always been one of my most interesting cases. This one's already always been one that I've taken a look at, and finally somebody did a documentary about it. So I think a lot of people were just excited that there's this case from 1989 and finally someone's doing a documentary about it. It could have been done years ago. What's going on your end there? Something exciting?
Sorry.
something really
Bill's
exciting.
Cat is in the other room and he has sat on a keyboard and it's making all kinds of noise.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All I see is
the cat sitting on the Mac keyboard in there?
Yeah.
Oh, that is hysterical. That's the noise I'm hearing. Okay, hold on a second. Let me go fix this. I'm going to send you a picture, Nick, so you can understand what we're dealing with. Wow.
Did your opinion change at all on what you think the ultimate answer is with the case?
well, you know what's interesting about my opinion and your theory as well, James, is that
I will say I'm not 100%. Even to this day, I'm not 100%.
You just got the picture.
I was looking at the picture.
Okay.
I'm not 100% on my theory either. I actually think your theory is just as good as anyone, if not better than most that I've heard through the years. But one thing that I think is interesting about your theory and my theory is my theory doesn't name a specific suspect where yours, does. But one thing that's interesting about your theory in comparison to mine is they hold the core of that theory. Our theories are very similar, if not the same, that somehow Amy's killer knew a lot about her and she may not have known anything about him. This guy had enough information to be able to call the home, know some things to trick a very smart young girl into meeting him somewhere. And, you and I both think that the killer was sexually attracted to Amy and that he made that decision from having seen her or, having saw her at some point. Now, I didn't receive this, and I wouldn't call this a tip because it's really just kind of random speculation, but it's very interesting. And I'm going to kind of tread lightly here because I had this conversation a few weeks ago, and there were certain portions of this conversation that the person asked me to pass along, but then other portions that they told me not to. So I'm going to kind of keep it brief because it was a few weeks ago and I don't remember what I agreed to keep quiet and what I was agreed to say and what I agreed not to say. So, but this was interesting and it's really got my mind kind of working, but I have no way of really following up on this thought. But this individual said that they have no evidence at all that this is the truth. It's just their total gut feeling. And they told me, they said, I can't get out of my mind that the connection to Amy and the killer was Jason, was her brother. This person believes that somehow somebody knew Jason and maybe not very well. Like if you sat Jason down, he couldn't, if he gave you a list of 10 people, this name wouldn't be on his list.
Okay. Just to be clear, they're not saying that Jason did this, but that
no. Jason had no involvement at all. He's very much a victim.
Yes.
And
but they're saying the connection might have been through his circle of acquaintances.
That's just their speculation, and I found it to be an interesting one because one thing I pointed out to this person was I said, we know Margaret's connections and Mark's connections were heavily looked into, and then you kind of wonder, well, I know they looked into Jason's stuff as well, but how far? This person, according to this person, would have been. They were much more specific. I'm trying to think of but I agreed not to say this portion of it. But this person would have been very much on the outside of. Okay. And
did they know of a particular person that was close to Jason that fits the bill? Like, did they get that specific?
They did not name a specific person, but off the record, I'll tell you a little bit more, but it would have been somebody that Jason would have, like I said, if you asked Jason to give you a list of 10 people he knew back then, I don't think this person would be on his list. It's that.
Did they pass that along to the police? I mean, that sounds like a pretty decent lead. So again, it's just speculation. I was told that this information has reached or they attempted to deliver this information to the FBI and to Spetzel. Good.
But they were reaching out to me because they were hoping to. I don't think that they've received confirmation that somebody's, took this information down. And I did say, look, I've been involved in multiple cases where I've reached out to the authorities, not Amy's case, but multiple cases. And I said, 9 times out of 10, you don't hear back. That doesn't mean that they didn't do anything with your information. That doesn't mean that they didn't look into it. But yeah, so this individual reached out to me with the hopes that I could put this information, get it to the right people. And I said, I can't guarantee you that I can get it to Torsney or to Spetzel. I said, but I can pass it along to Bill and James, and that can be a start.
Great.
So here's a question for you in regards to that one thing that you're referring to. Do you have an age range on that, or
This individual would have been younger. The guy that you and I spoke about, he would be.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, your and I call him your guy, and I know he's not really your prime suspect, but it's somebody you and I have discussed. He would be closer to that guy's age than. Remember when we spoke, I said I think the killer's more closer to Mark's age. Somebody in their early 30s. This individual would likely be early 20s.
Okay.
Would have been early 20s back then.
So Nick, do you or do you not have like in your mind a specific suspect at
I
this
don't.
moment?
I don't, and I don't know that I ever have. I've liked some of your suspects. I leave them on my list as well, but my top suspect, my prime suspect, is an unknown person. It's somebody that would have known information, and I believe a good deal of information about Amy, or at least the Mihaljevics themselves, and somehow got this information. And I've told Bill this. The thing I keep going back to is school pictures. And I even inquired to Bill, asked if she played soccer or anything like that, because you could take it another step. Was this soccer pictures or sports pictures or anything like that? But I just keep going back to the idea that when I was a kid, same age as Amy, we filled out this giant piece of paper that had all kinds of nonsense information that they required just to get you your pictures back. And this would be a way for someone that has never met Amy, never spoke to her directly. I'm not saying it's the guy that was taking the pictures at the school. It could have just been somebody that worked for the company that was in charge of that. And they would have had the ability to see her, to know that they were physically attracted to her. And they would have all of her information. They would very likely have a parent's name, full name. They would have they required all this information in case for some reason you didn't show up to school to retrieve your pictures. It was like, if you're going to pay for this, because they would charge you in advance, you'd write a check, and just think about how much information is on your check. I mean, I'm looking at my check right now. I got my full name. I got my address. And sometimes I've never had a phone number on my checks personally, but I think that can happen. But
sometimes they require it.
Yeah, and if you see Margaret Mihaljevic with the full address, you can just grab the white pages and look up the phone number. Yeah.
I have a funny story about this idea, actually. Back in 2012, I had written this book, The Man from Primrose Lane, that was a novel. Book. Thank you.
Here's a little moment here. I think that book's fantastic. I don't read a lot of fiction, but that is one of my favorite fictional books. I put it right up there, very close to 11/22/63. Sure. Yeah.
And that came out about 6 months before. And it was already, thank you though. So it's a novel, but it's heavily influenced by my work on cases like the Mihaljevic case. And if you know Amy's case and you read that novel, you can kind of see where I've taken some information from it and to inspire the story. But the point is I'm going to spoil the book now for people who haven't read it. There's still a lot here that I'm not spoiling, but I'm going to tell you that the answer in that book it has to do with the school pictures. The bad guy is the guy that took the school pictures, and that's how he was connected to the young girl that was murdered in that book. So because I like you had considered that as a possible theory. Now flash forward, so the book came out in 2012. About 2015, I'm at home just doing the dishes, and my cell phone rings, and I pick it up, and I can't remember how this guy got my number, but he got my number, and he's like, hey, he's like, is this James Renner? I'm like, yeah. He's like, so funny story. I'm the guy that took Amy Mihaljevic's school picture, and I just got done reading this book called The Man from Primrose Lane. And I have to tell you that I see the similarities here, and I just wanted to call and tell you that, of course, we didn't have anything to do with this. And somebody had come up to him at a dinner party in New York, where he now lives. He now lives in New York City. And they were at a dinner party and mentioned, hey, I just read this book. Look how similar this is to your business. And like maybe I had heard of his business or whatever, but I had even set his photography studio in Berea, which is a small town outside of Cleveland, and that's where his photography studio was. And so all this stuff matched up, and he's like, dude, he's like, you made me out to be the bad guy in your book. And I'm like, well, that was not really intentional there. But so I talked to him for a while, and he, of course, the FBI contacted him to get I think the negatives, and they were able to blow up, and that's what became her missing poster. So they worked closely with him. And I know that they looked into him, and I'm assuming his employees, but no, I've always liked that idea because it does give you all that personal information, but you're kind of removed from the whole thing so that nobody would be able to recognize you either. So it's a creepy idea. But as far as I can tell, at least the person who took her picture had nothing to do with it. Who knows who was, working in that lab at the time. But.
Well, and as I told Bill, I'm not even certain that it has to be the guy that, I'm not even certain that it has to do with her most recent picture. All that same information would have been on the year before as well. And that's why I kind of took it a step further and asked around, hey, what were some other things she would have been involved in where there are pictures that are being taken,
right, like soccer and
right. And and usually the people that shoot that theory down immediately, their go-to is, well, that would have been easy for them to follow up and solve that. But what I point out is that, again, I'm not necessarily saying it was the guy that took her picture. It was just, there's more people involved in this operation. And it's one way that I immediately thought that, hey, this is how this guy could also have these other girls' phone numbers and information. Because they travel around, they go to different schools, they collect all this information. It could have been somebody that was doing data entry or billing or something for one of these companies.
The lights.
Yeah. It's an interesting theory. It's I don't think it's super solid. But it's the one thing that I could come up with where he would have had a good deal of her information. And I really stick to this part. I don't think she knew this guy. And I think that even when she met him that day at the plaza and saw his face, if she saw his face before, she didn't know it that day at the plaza. And if she saw his face before, it would have been somebody in the background somewhere. And, and so that's where our theories are similar in a sense where, your theory about the nature center is brilliant because it's the same thing. You have, it's one thing that connects all these people and you and I believe Bill, and if anybody doesn't think so, I think they're really out to lunch here, but those phone calls all have to be connected. Amy was a smart girl. She wasn't dumb. And this guy practiced this. It didn't work out. He failed several times before attempting to get girls to meet him somewhere. And I firmly believe that. And I think for whatever reason, it worked on Amy. And I think that he either said the right words or he knew the right information. One of the two. Either he got lucky, and I hate to use that term, but either as a horrible person, he got lucky and said the right thing to her to convince her to go, or he knew the right things. He knew the right information. And, what's funny is, just kind of working through this in my head, James, you and I kind of came up with this when you and I were driving around Bay Village. We were talking about her leaving her bike there. And it just popped in my head. What if this guy knew enough to say, and think about how trusting a child would be if you said this. You go, meet me at the plaza, and afterwards, after we go pick out the gift for your mom, I'm going to take you to her work, and you can be there when we present it to her, when we have the cake when we have the punch. You can be there to celebrate with her, because then the kid's going, oh, well, this can't be dangerous. Not only am I going to do something great for my mom, I'm going to get delivered right to her afterwards, and she's going to drive me home, and she's going to love me for what I did for her, for helping out her workers, her coworkers.
That's creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. When I talked with Mark Mihaljevic about, Amy's trusting of this individual, that's pretty much what is the oddest thing, is that she was not a liar. She had not lied to her parents before.
About important stuff.
Well, yeah, about,
Right.
every kid has a white lie here and there.
Yeah.
But nothing on the grand scale of I'm going to meet a stranger.
Yeah.
But the theory that I kind of only have, I have settled sort of on two different theories. And one is the amount of people that Mark interacted with on a daily basis. And I know that his background was looked into extensively. And I just know that the information that he could have shared about the marriage issues that they were having.
Sure.
And that stuff is something that he even mentioned to me was a concern to him, that was a way that they got to her, meaning that they were able to, and that it wasn't so much they were able to get her to go, is that she wanted to do something nice for her mom. And you've always
Right.
said this before, that that their relationship wasn't the greatest at the time, but there was so much strain within the marriage itself that, Mark's concern was that maybe that she would have dropped her guard a little quicker to do something nice.
For sure. I think
Yeah.
so. One other thing I want to mention is, with some of the new information coming out, back to that suspect that I have in mind, and again, I'm not 100% sure. I wish anybody could be, but I still have in my mind essentially a top 3 suspects, and then there's the one guy from Key West, the former teacher from Amherst, who in my mind is the prime suspect, kind of rises above the others. And the key to him, there was an FBI agent who said, look, we can't connect him to the nature center. If he was there, it almost has to be him. But he says he wasn't there and we can't connect him. And of course, in the special, you hear the story about how, I kind of bluffed him, and, he said, well, I never told them I wasn't there. I just said I didn't remember being there, which
Right.
in my mind is almost, saying that he was. But so we still haven't been able to connect him. But then just last week, maybe it could have just literally been like 2 or 3 days ago. And the police and FBI have this information now. A former student of his, when he was teaching in Vermilion, would help him with the animals in his classroom. He had this menagerie, this little zoo in his classroom of snakes and guinea pigs and chinchillas. And these students would volunteer and he would be alone with them in the classroom. So this person that came forward was a volunteer for him from like 1982 to 1987 in Vermilion. And he did 2 whole summers. He lived across the street from the school, so he could get there easily. So he knew Runkle well. Runkle would take him in his car, take him back to his apartment. He said there was never anything that was overtly inappropriate, other than the comments that he would make that would be very sexual. But he did say, he's like, I am 100% sure he's connected to the nature center, and lying about it because I was there with him. This kid, who's now in his, late 40s, I think, he says that he and Runkle would drive to that nature center in Bay Village, and he was very specific, nature center in Bay Village, and they would deliver mice for the snakes, which is the story I had heard before from one of his former employers. There was this rumor that he, would breed mice, and when he had too many mice, he would deliver it to the nature center. And this kid said, yes, not only did he do that, but I was there with him. So now I am 100% sure he's connected to that nature center, and he's lying about it. And there's really only one reason he'd be lying about being there, because he knows that's the intersection of him and Amy and these other girls.
Yeah, I like Nick. I definitely, ascribe to your theory as well. I think it's, definitely one of the best, if not the best one put out there. Of course, we don't know the exact answer of who actually did it, but I wanted to explain about the person that Nick and I had talked about, being in that age range, in the early 20s. And that was a person that we've discussed. Actually, James, you and I discussed it. He is the one that worked at the city and then was hired and fired within those few days that she was.
Which is a really cool lead that you kind of dug up on your own.
Yeah, I mean, and basically I just did a FOIA request and wanted to see, because basically I had worked at the city of Rocky River.
So you knew how the records worked.
Well, not so much how the records worked. It was just, I just knew how much time these people could have in the day.
Oh, sure.
And you could pretty much figure out what people's schedules were. I mean, you're just driving around your service. If you're working in the service department, let's say you're picking up trash or you're filling potholes or you're, one of those guys. And some of the characters that I worked with were also, it just raised my suspicion and the thought that, hey, somebody shady could be like one of these. I could see one of these guys being responsible for that type of thing. Not nobody is specific, of course, but that's when I decided to do the records request, and that's where I came up with that individual. And again, there's nothing that's nothing criminal that he's been connected to other than alcohol related offenses, and that's there's no name attached to it because there's nothing that connects him to it other than the weird dates, and
that's a good lead though.
And the fact that the proximity to where Amy lived, because it was within a quarter mile. So that definitely was something that I still haven't been able to cross off my list.
I do have one other exclusive for you. I forgot about this. I'm so glad I remembered to mention this. I have some information on the DNA evidence in this case.
Okay.
Have we talked much about the DNA? I know you kind of got a half answer from Spetzel, but did we get any further after that?
We've talked, I think, off the record. No pun intended, Nick. So I don't know if we've discussed it on air.
So I do know, I know what they have, and I know what they're dealing with. And it's as frustrating as everything else in this case. But there's a little bit of update on that. They do have hair. In fact, several hairs. They have 3 hairs. There's one that they found at the scene, one that they found on her pants, and one hair that they found on her underwear. And they've been able to get partial profiles from these. So I think in the future, there's, 100% in my mind at this point, this case is going to be solved. And they, because they one way or another, they'll get them either through scientific evidence or just police work. But this could be it, because they're starting to get partial profiles from these hairs. Now, a couple interesting things. One, each of these hairs belongs to a different individual. Based on the source I have, who has taken a look at the scientific evidence that was generated from these hairs. So now that could mean a number of things. That could mean a contaminated crime scene. It could mean multiple suspects, which is another theory I was kind of thinking about too. It could, so who knows? They have to develop and have to track these hairs back down to the source of these individuals, and whether or not they're suspects or whether or not they happen to be at the crime scene for other reasons or interacted with Amy for other reason.
Just to jump in here. I've seen this in more than one case, and it's awfully deflating, but I'll bring it up because we're on the subject. I've seen several times, not often, but more than once, where they trace a hair back, and it's because they failed to clean out the body bag properly.
From a different cadaver.
Right.
Why would they even reuse a body bag?
Yeah, I mean, come on. How much does a body bag cost?
Yeah. I think it depends on where you live.
Sure.
Some of these poor communities,
i.e. Ashland County.
Fair point.
They reuse them. And I've actually seen at least one case. I can't recall specifically which one, because I had the great idea of covering a new case every week. So it's a lot of heavy lifting. But I saw one case where they charged the parents for the body bag. They sent them a bill for the bag.
Oh my God. As a parent, like that's when I end up in jail because I'm going down to the corner and busting out a can of whoop ass.
Yeah, it was
That
this,
is some
this poor area. I think it was in Colorado, and the reason why they sent the bill to the mother, that was her daughter that was killed was grown. She was an adult, but they've never arrested anyone. Well, they've made an arrest. They've never convicted anybody for the killing. They believe that the brother, the mom's son, killed his sister. And so once they arrested that guy, they sent her a bill for the body bag. I mean, come on, you couldn't come. It was like $218.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I just completely hijacked your story.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. One other detail that's come out about the DNA just in the last day or two is so a little bit of investigation has been done into the what's called a haplogroup, and that's genetics, just like family trees. Well, it is essentially the science of family trees. Haplogroups are how people, we all come from a common ancestor, this mitochondrial Eve, millions of years ago or whatever. And just, like an evolutionary chain, part of your genome gets changed over the years. And so if you go back to Germanic people, they have a different what's called haplogroup than like African people or descendants from Africa. So you can kind of tell a person's race and some other things based on this genetic information. Long story short, the second hair, the hair that was found on her jogging pants, matches with a kind of a rare haplogroup that this specific mutation in the gene that is picked up in this hair that they found on her jogging pants also comes with a very high risk of schizophrenia, which to me is definitely supportive of the fact that hair, somebody with schizophrenia or severe depression, mental issues, is linked. So is that the hair of the killer? That to me is at least a little supportive of the fact that yes, that's probably the killer's hair. In which case, it's just a matter of time before we match up more of that genetic profile to whoever did this.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So it seems like they're on their way to doing that snapshot DNA possibility, where they provide us with what the person may look like. I mean, we've seen these in different cases. That they usually come back Western European. That's the group that we see a lot, but that makes up most of our country.
Yeah, ancestry DNA. That's pretty much. Yep, Western European.
Yep.
It depends on how much genetic information they have, and it's what they have right now might not be enough to do that, but they are, I know, retesting, and the FBI just developed a new test in the last year where before you could only get like mitochondrial DNA, which comes from your mother, from the hair. But now the FBI has developed a new method where they can get nuclear DNA from hair, if in some cases. So, I think they're retesting the DNA constantly, and one of these days it's going to pick up more information or full genetic write-up on whose hairs these are, and it's likely one of those is the killer. So which might explain why the police seem to not be doing much, because if you have that on the horizon, are you going to roll the dice and charge somebody, or are you going to play it safe and wait for DNA confirmation?
Yeah, Torsney said, I mean, even when I met with him, and that was the first thing that came out of his mouth was, I just got off the phone with scientists and we're, discussing what we can do with what we have. And it could be days, weeks, or years.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even think he said years. I think he just said it could be days, weeks, or a year. But it seemed very confident that with what they had, and this was back in August, I believe, and they, like you said, they've come up with new stuff. I mean, they're coming up with new stuff every day. So, with what Torsney said, I mean, I do believe, like you said, they're doing stuff. It's just behind the scenes, and it's not a lot of what you would think of as, they're beating down doors, because what they're doing is they're waiting for results.
Well,
and kind of
you got to believe that this late in the game, it's DNA or a confession, and that's really it. I mean,
right.
I couldn't think of any other way to break this case. And what's interesting, though, James, you brought up multiple hairs, and you and I have kicked the tires on the idea that Ted Lamborghini, did I get his name right? So a weird thing in Bill's theory is that if it was somebody in Mark's background, didn't Ted Lamborghini work for a Buick dealership?
He worked for
Ford.
For Ford. He was at the Ford. So he was more like the Ford plant where they're assembling the parts of the cars.
So he wouldn't have come in contact with Mark then, because Mark was GM.
No, but you know who Lamborghini would have come in contact with, I believe, are two people that are in my top three. One, the teacher, and the other one, which is the guy that was involved in the Metro Parks at the time, because both the teacher and the Metro Parks guy and Lamborghini were known to frequent that area of Brook Park where men would meet up on the down low. At the adult bookstores. So, they're kind of all running in the same area. And what we do know is Lamborghini was involved with, at least to some extent, with these crimes that occurred around the Oakland County area when those 4 kids were abducted and murdered in the 70s. And we know for a fact that was a group of individuals. It wasn't just one person. So Lamborghini comes from that area down here, and now he's in prison for that. So Lamborghini comes up a lot.
If anybody needs filled in on who Theodore Lamborghini is, this is a little plug here for my show. True Crime Garage, we covered the Oakland County child killer case in August of last year, which is available for free on iTunes, Stitcher. We did 2 episodes on it, and what we did was we were able to go back, and I know we're not the only ones to have done this, so we can't take full credit here, but we were able to go back and find a handful of individuals that were running in the same circle in the Oakland County area at that time, and using statements that they gave to law enforcement, you can kind of piece together who was involved in the operation of abducting and killing and dumping these kids. And I say operation
directly.
He, yes. And I can't remember his exact wording, but there was an individual that came forward that stated that they kept a photo book. There was a guy that owned a bike shop in the poor part of town up there. And a lot of the kids would frequent this bike shop, and they would offer these poor kids money or snacks, candy, all kinds of different things, sometimes cigarettes, whatever, to get these kids to perform or go along with certain things with these adult men.
Sounds like that awful episode of Different Strokes.
That does sound like it.
Yeah.
Or Mr. Belvedere.
The one guy at the bike shop, for whatever reason, the guys kept a photo album of the children that would do this stuff. And there's a guy that spoke to law enforcement that said, I swear I saw a picture of the King kid. I can't remember King's first name, but the blonde haired Timothy King. Yeah. Saw a picture of
the chicken bone, right?
Yeah. And here's an interest, and this isn't a theory I put.
You got interrupted there. So he saw a picture of Timothy King. Oh, that he saw a picture of in the photo book. Right.
Yeah. And then there's another individual that states that they believe that the one guy that's now dead, the heavyset guy, that he saw him carrying Timothy King to his car, and King may have been dead at that point. But one theory I didn't put forth. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I gotta jet and pick up my kid. You guys, please carry on the conversation. Thank you for having me on the show again.
Thank you, James, so much for coming in, and thank you so much for being a participant in what we discussed earlier. If you could shoot me maybe a text about that.
Yes, let's keep talking off the air.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
But you have safe drive back to where you're going.
All right, see you, Nick.
See
Tell
you,
the
James.
captain I said hi.
Yep, good talking to you.
So, there you have it. Part 1 of our discussions about the documentary and the case. Thank you again for listening to this week's episode, I should say bonus episode, of Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, and stay tuned next week for Part 2 of the roundtable discussion. That, in all reality, turns into a conversation with just Nick from True Crime Garage. But I do thank you, James Renner, for all of your participation in this podcast, and all of his books are available on Amazon.com as well as his website, jamesrenner.com. If you enjoy this independently produced podcast, you can help keep this show going by clicking on the donate button on the bottom left on whokilledamymihaljevic.com. Donations to support the show can also be made through the Venmo app with my username at Bill-Huffman-3. Thank you to the listeners and the donors that help keep this podcast going. Without your support, this show wouldn't be possible. So again, any amount is appreciated, but you can also help support the show by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that will also significantly help get this show the coverage it deserves. You can contact the Bay Village Police Department at 440-871-1234 if you have any new information regarding Amy's case. The FBI is also offering a reward of up to $25,000 with information regarding the individual or individuals responsible for the death of Amy Renee Mihaljevic. So anyone with information concerning this case, please contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. So thank you again for listening. I appreciate all the support. And let's just hope there is resolution sooner rather than later. And to all the listeners, be safe.